Greetings. Father J. Geisler here. Does the Bible have anything to say about addiction? Well, I want to let you know it does. It has, for example, the first person to get drunk, Noah. He drinks so much he doesn't even remember exactly what happened, and scholars have debated exactly what happened with his sons. But we want to let you know this is a problem that has existed for thousands of years. We know there's a Chinese proverb, for example. It says, a man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, the drink takes a man. We think that proverb, for example, out of the Chinese culture is over 3,000 years old. So what I would like to do is read from Proverbs. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has strife? Who has complaints? Who has needless bruises? Who has bloodshot eyes? Those who linger over wine, who go to sample bowls of mixed wine. Do not gaze at wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, then it goes down smoothly. In the end, it bites like a snake, it poisons like a viper. Your eyes will see strange sights. Your mind imagine confusing things. You'll be like one sleeping on the high seas, lying on the top of the rigging. They hit me, you will say, but I'm not hurt. They beat me, but I don't feel it. When I wake up, I hope I can find another drink. Well, that is shows you how far back this goes. That denial, obsession, compulsion. What is it that he wants after he's comes awake? First thing, I hope I can find another drink. That's that obsession that we talked about. So the Bible has a lot to say about alcoholism or addiction. There's over 100 verses in Scripture dealing with primarily drunkenness, alcohol. So this whole 12-step recovery has, Judeo-Christian roots. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. Like, where does this all come from? How was it that alcoholism that has existed for, thousands of years, or I guess as long as man has crushed grape, how was it that people recovered? Well, I think people have always had the ability to have a spiritual experience, and something happens and they realize that it's wrong and this is hurting their family, and they abstain. But most people were like, well, just drink a little, don't drink too much. The problem, of course, is today scientifically we know that that's very, very difficult because of that compulsion. Once you have that first one, there's this phenomenon of craving that occurs. So when do I think it actually evolved with the church? Well, I think it happened in England. England at one point had a terrible, terrible gin epidemic. It would be like a crack cocaine, or today the opioid epidemic. It was destroying England at that time. There's actually sayings like drunk for a penny, dead drunk for two. It was a problem in early industrial England. And what happened was the Methodist movement, which came out of the Anglican Church, they started going out and reaching, for example, coal miners. They started to reach the industrial poor. Now, they didn't have a 12-step program, but the Methodists eventually adopted that they would be a dry church. If you were in the Methodist Church, you abstained from alcohol. So it gave people a place where they could recover, where it was socially acceptable not to drink. I think that was one of the early experiments in Christianity. Here we are, we're committed to our brother and sister. They are weaker, they can't drink successfully. It causes them pain, it causes them to have problems. So we will take on their burdens and we will abstain. And so the Methodists were, in some sense, an early support group for people who were alcoholics and addicts. So this whole idea of addiction alcohols isn't something new. It goes back to, colonial America. So what actually happened? What was the first support system other than the Methodists? It was a group called the Washingtonians. And what happened was, it was in Maryland, in a small town in Maryland, where there was a preacher who was going to preach about, turning your life over to Jesus. And so these men who were in a bar, Chase's Tavern, went down to mock him. And somehow this minister, this evangelist, touched their hearts. And they came back and they promised that they would not drink. They would go on the wagon. And by the way, that's because you would drink from a water wagon. If you got drunk, you would fall off the wagon. That's where that came from. Well, this was in, about the 1840s. And they were so successful that they had 500,000 members. They were called the Washingtonians. Washington wanted his troops to be temperate. He actually would punish them for drunkenness. So, having said that about what the Washingtonians were involved, they were very successful. As a matter of fact, Abraham Lincoln actually addressed them as a congressman, talked to him about it. His father had been an alcoholic, so they were very successful. Unfortunately, they collapsed over the issue of slavery. There would be no other support group until Alcoholics Anonymous actually comes about in the 30s. And even with that, we have Christian influence.